counts 2, 3, 4, and 5, but they're saying they're unable to reach it right now on count 1, racketeering conspiracy, the most serious, that says that Combs led a criminal enterprise and that he committed at least 2 predicate acts. There are 8 that the jurors will see. We have a shot of the verdict sheet, but these are some of the crimes. If jurors find that just 2 within the racketeering, that would be a not guilty. So we'll of course continue to bring you the very latest, but this is happening as we speak. It almost feels like as the rain was coming down, we're getting all of this information. It was sunshine about 20 minutes ago. So we'll see what happens, but that is the very latest here from the courthouse in New York.
Yeah, Jerika, I know information is coming into you as we speak, and so you're relaying it to us. Can you explain how you're getting this information? Reporters in the courtroom, and we have partial verdicts, but not entirely. And so the judge is basically saying either you're going to have to go back and finish entirely, or are they going to regroup? What happens now? Do we know?
Yeah, so we have Alice Gaynor. She's a WCBS reporter. She has access to her phone in the courtroom, so she's able to give us notes. We also have a couple of reporters that are in the actual courtroom where all of this is taking place, where Combs is. We know that his mother is in that courtroom. We did not see his children here today, but we're not sure if maybe they will show up, knowing that the jury has reached a verdict in at least 4 of those 5 counts. As for what happens next, we will wait to get another note, but it sounds like the defense wants the jury to continue to deliberate, saying they've only been deliberating about a day and a half.
Know that there was a lot of questions that were also submitted to the judge. And so as you analyze or look into what those questions meant or didn't mean, is there anything that we can kind of glean from that? There was a question asked this morning as well before partial verdicts were reached.
That's right. So before we started the proceedings this morning, before the jurors went to deliberate, there was a question about what does distribution mean? And drug distribution is one of those criminal elements that fall underneath that racketeering conspiracy. So in my mind, I thought maybe they're done with the racketeering conspiracy and have moved on to the sex trafficking, because they then asked for transcripts and what testimony was given by a Daniel Phillip. This was the second person to testify in this trial many weeks ago, and he's a former male escort who said that he remembers possibly hearing abuse in another room when he was with Ventura Combs at a hotel here in New York City. So we have had, we're trying to read between the lines, if you will, about what those notes meant, but this one is very clear. The note saying that the jurors have reached a verdict and 4 of the 5 counts is huge. Now we're trying to figure out, will they have to continue to deliberate? Will this be a partial verdict? That remains to be seen at this hour.
And for those joining us on CBS News 24/7, a partial verdict has been reached in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. Jerika, just for those tuning in right now, can you repeat what you heard from our reporter inside the courtroom on those specific charges where a verdict has been reached?
I'm so sorry. Can you say that one more time?
No problem. If you can, just repeat what the reporter had told you inside the courtroom in case people are following in right now or tuning in right now, because we have on our screen a verdict reached in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. But I want to make it clear that an entire verdict has not been reached, only partial. And so maybe go over some of the notes as to what you are getting from the reporter inside.
So I was actually outside just to set the scene, and I noticed Nicole Westmoreland, who's one of the attorneys for Sean Combs, was walking inside with a family friend of Sean Combs, and that was the first time I remember hearing there might be a note. Whenever there's a note, of course, we all sort of clamor together to figure out what does that mean. And these notes indicate, again, that they have reached a verdict in 4 of these 5 counts. Some of the notes that preceded that announcement, Alice Gaynor said at 4:26 this afternoon, Combs appears to be praying. His head is bowed, his hands are folded on his lap, that the attorneys were surrounding him. At 4:31, Combs' head was down, that he seems grim. Mark Agnifilo had just handed Combs a note. Mark Agnifilo is the lead attorney in this case. So you can even see, based on the media presence too, that people are starting to hear that there is a note and a development in this trial. I'm looking at notes as we're getting them again from Alice Gaynor. That note we already saw. But it really has been a remarkable day when you think about the 8 weeks that these jurors were told they would be here, and this is the 8th week. They heard over 30 witnesses. The defense didn't call any witnesses. They felt apparently that they had proven their case. You know, when you look at the closing arguments of Mark Agnifilo, the lead attorney, he said that the prosecutors have, quote, charged one of the most serious, complicated, comprehensive statutes on the books. They have charged personal drug use and threesomes as racketeering. So that was the argument from the defense going into this deliberation period. Meanwhile, the prosecutor said the defendant was the head of Combs Enterprise, that it existed to serve his needs and what he wanted. The other members of the conspiracy and the Combs Enterprise were the defendant's inner circle. That inner circle, they said, was made up of his loyal lieutenants, his chief of staff, and his bodyguards, who helped him satisfy his every desire. Those were the words from Christy Slavic, who gave the closing arguments not long ago in reference to this trial involving Sean Combs.
Jerika, I know you're getting this information in real time. We'll let you gather more information. We'll come back to you, so stand by. We're going to bring in CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi with more on this. We're talking about partial verdict. Explain that and what is happening now in the courtroom.
Yeah, so what's happening now is the prosecution and the defense, along with the judge, are trying to decide what to do next. If at all possible, they would love to get to a verdict in its entirety. It does appear that they are having difficulty coming to a unanimous decision with respect to the RICO charge, which I would note is the most difficult and legally complex charge. But the options, and what I think likely will happen, is that since this is the first time the jurors are coming to the judge saying, look, we just can't come to a resolution, they'll be given what's known as an Allen charge, sometimes referred to as a dynamite charge, which is essentially just the judge telling them, go back at it, do your civic duty. If you can, at all possible, come to unanimous verdict. I mean, the issue here is people need to, and the instructions to jurors are, maintain your integrity with according to what you believe the evidence shows, but keep an open mind, engage in a robust discussion about the evidence, hear other jurors' points of view. And if you can come around to changing your mind with integrity, with really feeling that you've come to the right conclusion, then try to get to a verdict. Because a partial verdict, while it is acceptable technically, it's a difficult resolution, especially on this RICO charge, since it is one of those top charges. About that RICO charge, what needs to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, which I'm assuming they're having a difficulty with, is an enterprise, right? You think RICO, you think mafia, mob charges, a criminal racketeering conspiracy. And what needs to be shown is that over the course of a 10-year period, 2 predicate racketeering crimes were agreed to. Again, it's a conspiracy charge, right? So it's Sean Combs agreeing with one of his uncharged co-conspirators. And in this case, the co-conspirators that the prosecution has alleged is KK, Christina Korem, his chief of staff. And then they're saying he had this rotating body, these bodyguards that rotated throughout that 10-year to 20-year period.
All right, Caroline, I want to interrupt you just real quickly. Please stand by for more on breaking this down, but I do want to get back to CBS News national correspondent Jerika Duncan, joining us live from New York City now. Jerika, I know that you have more information just coming into you in real time. Why don't you tell us?
Yeah, and just to reset again, we're hearing notes from inside the courtroom that the jury has a decision on 4 of the 5 counts. But we're not sure whether or not they are definitely going to go back and deliberate. The prosecution wants them to continue to deliberate, as well as the defense. But the Combs children, we just saw 3 of his daughters that walked back in. So again, earlier I mentioned that it was just his mother that was here today, and that we noticed his attorneys go back inside within the last 45 minutes or so. And the notes that were coming in early on was that Combs appears to be praying, that he had his head bowed and his hands folded on his lap. that Combs' head was down and that he seems grim, and that Mark Agnifilo, his lead attorney, just handed Combs a note. That was around 4:30 this afternoon. So we're looking to get some more insight as to what's happening inside the courtroom. But again, the judge saying that the jury should keep at it, the defense wanting that to happen, but it's that racketeering conspiracy, count one, that they have not reached a decision on.
And Jerika, behind you, we see a lot more activity than we did in just the past 15 minutes. Usually when a verdict is reached, family members are contacted, they show up to then hear what the verdict may be. So you're saying that right now his family is showing up. His mom was in the courtroom, but could that be a telltale sign that there's more of an announcement to be made?
It could be. I mean, his family has been here throughout the trial. A lot of times it's been his mother, three of his sons. His daughters were here early on in this trial, but to see that they just walked in could be a sign that there is more to come.
As we look at this, a partial verdict reached. This is breaking news right now, this information coming in within the last half hour. It's important to note that the judge hasn't made the final decision, correct, Jerika? So it's ultimately up to the judge to then tell the jury.
It looks like another sprinter just pulled up, and that's typical as well, because you'll see the girls will go in and then his sons will go in. So it's likely that his sons are in this vehicle right behind us, and I'm trying to see if I can get a better look. But it looks like that's what's happening right now. So to your point, I think everybody feels sort of the weight of this decision. I mean, Sean Combs is facing up to life in prison, and these are very serious charges, obviously being in federal court. But to hear again, the jury has reached a decision. They said on 2, 3, 4, and 5, and just to repeat that has to do with count 2. That's the sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura. Count 3 would be the Mann Act violation for Cassie Ventura. Count 4 is the sex trafficking of Jane. And count 5 is the Mann Act transportation for Jane. We see some of the sons with the umbrellas up as they enter into the courtroom or enter into the courthouse right now.
Jerika, we'll let you continue gathering more information. I want to go back to Caroline Polisi to kind of detail what this partial verdict means. And let's specifically talk about the RICO charge and why maybe the jury may be hung up on that right now.
Yeah, the RICO charge is by far, in a way, the most complicated charge in this case. What the government will need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt and convince those jurors of is that Sean Combs agreed with at least one other person to engage in a criminal conspiracy. And that's an enterprise conspiracy, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. Typically, you think of mafia organizations, organized crime, things like that. So a lot of people have noted this is not your garden variety typical RICO enterprise charge. And they haven't alleged that it's bad boy entertainment that is actually a criminal conspiracy. They've alleged more of an amorphous group of people containing Sean Combs at the top, at the helm of this enterprise, and then his chief of staff, and then a rotating cast of characters, including his bodyguards and other assistants, that they agreed to engage in this criminal conspiracy, the object of which was to essentially prop up Sean Combs in the public's eye, to cover his crimes, to basically allow him to indulge in his sexual desires, whether or not that was criminal or not, drug distribution, transportation to engage in prostitution. Now, what's interesting, and you can sort of game this out mathematically, is that those last 4 charges, which Jerika is reporting, they have come to a conclusion about, they have come to a verdict. Those 4 charges are 2 of those. If they found him guilty on 2 of those, that would be enough to find the predicate acts necessary for that RICO conspiracy. So part, again, of the RICO conspiracy is this enterprise, but it's also that they engaged in 2 of these predicate RICO crimes within a 10-year period. And 2 of those crimes are sex trafficking and or transportation to engage in prostitution. Now, it's the strongest evidence that the government has, I believe, in this case is just the transportation to engage in prostitution. They brought receipts. They had hotel bills. They had flights lined up. Things of that nature.
Caroline, let's talk about the here and now, because we have our cameras outside the courthouse. We have reporters inside right now. Jerika Duncan's giving us real-time information as she's getting it from the reporter. Family members are arriving. So what is the process right now? I mean, we're close to the end of work hours. I don't know about court times, but does this mean there'll be an announcement today from the judge? The jury has to go back. Why are family members arriving right now?
Well, obviously, any family member, if they hear that the jury has even reached a partial verdict, they will want to be there for the time. The judge has allowed the jurors to set their own schedule in this case. It is nearing the end, 5 o'clock, and typically you do get verdicts sort of towards the end of days. But, in my experience, the judge will not allow the partial verdict to stand and declare a mistrial on the RICO charge. I believe he will give them at least one more instruction, one more dynamite instruction and or Allen charge, telling them to go back, try again, do their utmost best to reach a unanimous verdict in the RICO charge. Whether it works or not, I think he does have the duty to at least give that instruction. And whether the jury decides or elects to stay for the evening and or to come in, tomorrow around 9 a.m. to continue deliberations, I don't know. I would be surprised if the judge simply said, okay, I'm declaring a mistrial on the RICO charge. Let's hear the verdict for counts 2 through 5.
Let's talk about the timing of this partial verdict. Are you surprised how quickly it happened? Are you not surprised? And what does that mean? And what does that tell you?
Yeah, this jury was pretty active. There were a number of notes both yesterday and today. Remember, there was that first note the jury gave the judge saying that they felt that one of the jury members could not follow the judge's instructions, which, was a huge red flag. I mean, it indicates sort of dissension among the ranks. It indicates that the jury wasn't necessarily getting along. But then we didn't really hear much about that afterwards. And apparently they could come to a unanimous agreement with respect to at least 4 of these charges. So they worked that out. There were then, a lot of questions or requests from the judge for evidence about Cassie Ventura, the testimony being read back. So it did seem to me like they were going through methodically those charges. The first day, it seemed like they were looking at the RICO charge. And then today, when asked for those transcripts of the Cassie Ventura testimony, well, it seemed like they were looking at the sex trafficking charge with respect to her. It seems like those other counts went pretty quickly. So it seems like perhaps they sort of bundled everything together in those last 4 charges. We never know what goes on behind closed doors. It would surprise me if they only found sex trafficking with respect to one of the victims, meaning Cassie and or Jane, and then not with respect to another. I think the behavior sort of, if you buy into the theory of the government's case and you found him guilty on one, it seems that it would cover the other as well. So, just breaking down a number of scenarios in my mind about what that partial verdict could be.
Sure,
in all likelihood, it's either all guilty or all not guilty.
Absolutely. All eyes on that front door of the courtroom. We have our cameras situated outside. Jerika Duncan standing by for more information from our reporters inside. Can you talk about maybe the timing of the day? Right now, there's a podium set up. Sometimes reporters will be able to get new information, but right now it's kind of like anyone's guess what's happening inside in terms of if the judge is going to make the jury go back or if they're going to keep on working today. Someone entering inside right now. This might be more family coming in after they heard about the verdict, partial verdict reached. So maybe just talk about what's happening inside right now as we wait. All right, Caroline Polisi, are you able to kind of expand on that? Yeah,
yes,
no worries.
Sorry, I thought you were talking to Jerika.
Yeah, Jerika's standing by.
Yeah, this is the most, the most tense it gets in any trial, to be sure. I mean, the man's liberty is at stake. This is, we talked about this from the beginning. This is not a state domestic violence case. This is a federal criminal racketeering conspiracy charge, and on top of sex trafficking charges, which those two sex trafficking charges carry with it a minimum of 15 years in prison. So that's just the bottom of what he could get. So if he's found guilty on either of the sex trafficking charges, it's 15 years minimum. The RICO charge is a little bit different. There's no mandatory minimum, but it's also a maximum of potentially life in prison. So he is looking at the potential for life behind bars. So this is, it's all in these moments.
As you said, very tense inside. Caroline Polisi, thank you so much for your take on this. Again, if you're joining us, a partial verdict reached in the Sean Combs trial. Judge urging the jury to go back and deliberate. We'll continue to follow this. The take.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. We are following breaking news out of New York City. The jury in the Sean Diddy Combs racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking trial has reached a verdict on 4 of the 5 counts. The jury very recently has told the court it is unable to come to a consensus on count 1, that being racketeering conspiracy. I want to bring in our Jerika Duncan, who has been following this case from CBS News from its inception. Jerika, as you well know, this is a high-impact, high-visibility story. Lots of people probably got phone messages alerting them to this news. Reset the clock for those just maybe tuning in. What has transpired in the last hour?
In the last hour, we've seen Sean Combs' children arrive in 2 sprinters. They just went inside the federal courthouse there. His mother was there earlier today, and about an hour ago, I remember seeing a couple of the defense attorneys running inside. So it was clear that there was an update. And throughout this, we've been receiving notes. But this particular note read, according to our reporter that's inside, quote, "We have reached a verdict on counts 2, 3, 4, 5. Unable on count 1, they said, have jurors with unpersuadable opinions." So what are counts 2, 3, 4, and 5? Those have to do with the sex trafficking and transportation for the purpose of prostitution. They involve Cassie Ventura, an ex-girlfriend of Combs, as well as Jane, another person who testified under that pseudonym, also an ex-girlfriend of Sean Combs. That racketeering conspiracy, though, that is the most serious charge, and it's complicated. There are 8 criminal elements. The jurors only have to prove that 2 of them, or feel that 2 of them have been proven in order for him to be found guilty on that racketeering conspiracy, as well as believing that Combs led a criminal enterprise for his sexual desires. So even when you take a look at this verdict sheet, for instance, Major, there's the racketeering conspiracy, and then there's the not guilty, guilty. And under that, each juror would tell us, the public, the court, if they believe, for instance, acts involving kidnapping, that Combs was involved in that, whether that was proved or not proved, or acts involving arson, or acts involving bribery. So we knew that that one might be something that these jurors could possibly be deliberating on for quite some time, or in this case, have jurors, according to this note, that have unpersuadable opinions. But what we're hearing again right now, that the jurors have reached a verdict. We don't know what that verdict is, though, on counts 2, 3, 4, and 5.
And Jerika, just to get a sense of things, and I know this is evolving literally by the moment, do you have any sense, based on what you've heard from the courtroom, how this will play out this afternoon? Might it continue in tomorrow? Might the judge tell the jury, I want you to try a little harder, spend a little bit more time on count 1? Or is there any expectation we might have the verdicts for those other counts you mentioned actually read out today?
It appears the prosecution and the defense would like the jurors to deliberate a little bit longer. Remember, they just got this case yesterday at about 11:40 in the morning. So they haven't been deliberating that long. And the judge appears to be moving in that direction. The last note that I saw said that they were looking at possible proposals, but it does appear that they were moving in the direction of wanting these jurors to deliberate a little bit longer on that count 1 racketeering conspiracy. There is a chance, though, they could stay a little bit longer tonight, because early on, the judge said during his instructions, listen, the court closes at 5, but if you all feel that you want to go a little bit later, let us know, and we might make that accommodation. So perhaps we're in that space of maybe they deliberate a little bit longer, maybe they deliberate until 7 o'clock this evening. We don't know, but that was always an option that the judge set out during his jury instructions yesterday.
Tarika, you've covered this case extensively, and that is putting it mildly. Remind our audience the central arguments made by the prosecutors and the defense counsel representing Sean Diddy Combs.
The government essentially said that Sean Combs led a criminal enterprise for his sexual desires, that he tried to cover up crimes, that he was the leader of this criminal enterprise, and that he committed at least, obviously, at least two that they believe of these elements that are part of the racketeering conspiracy. In fact, I can't even say at least two. They believe that he committed all of them, but they only need two from the jurors, as I mentioned before. The defense, though, in their closing arguments said that there were two trials that were going on here. One that had to do with witnesses that they believe were not being truthful, and the other one had to do with evidence. And they asked the court, look at the evidence. Look at what those text messages were from Cassie Ventura, from Jane, where they appeared to be willing participants. But the government reminded the jurors that even if you've seen 100 of those text messages where it looks like they are willing participants, you only need to find one time, for instance, with sex trafficking, that they were forced or there was fraud or coercion. So it's very broad when you look at this case as a whole, and a number of legal experts that I've spoken to have talked about that openly, especially when it comes to racketeering conspiracy. But simply put, the defense said that this was a case that was overcharged, and they thought it had to do more with personal drug use and threesomes, not racketeering, they argued in their closing arguments last week.
Tarika, as I mentioned, this is an evolving situation. I want you to please stay with us in case there are any other developments, which I know you will convey to us as soon as they arrive. In the meantime, I want to bring in CBS News legal contributor Caroline Pelosi, who joins me now for some analysis. Caroline, for the audience who may not be accustomed to this process of a partial verdict, is that rare or somewhat common? And in a case like this, to Jerika's last point, for the jury, it seems to come down to, were those involved in any way cooperative, or were they clearly and evidentially coerced into participating in the things that the government alleged Sean Diddy Combs was involved in?
Yeah, to the first part, it is pretty rare, although it gets less rare the more charges that the jury has to deliberate on, right? So this is not just a one count indictment. This is a 5-count indictment. And as Jerika noted, the RICO charge is quite complicated. There was, a lot of information about just the law of RICO for the jurors to digest. So it doesn't surprise me that that's the one they're potentially hung up on. I would note they have not yet reached a partial verdict. They have told the judge that they have come to an agreement on those remaining four, or the last four charges, but that they're sort of deadlocked on that first charge. I would be completely shocked if the judge this time around said, okay, we're going to take those verdicts on 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we're going to declare a mistrial on count 1. Typically what happens in this situation is the judge will provide what's known as a dynamite charge. It's called an Allen charge, meant to sort of light a fire under the jury to say, go back one more time, do your civic duty, try your hardest, see if you can, amicably come to a conclusion with a robust exchange of ideas. Nobody's saying that, we want to coerce a verdict here, but we want you to talk to each other and think about the evidence and see if you can really, with integrity, come to unanimous verdict with respect to that first charge. Now, with respect to your second question, it seems, no, they have come to an agreement with the sex trafficking charges and the transportation to engage in prostitution. I would note that both of those charges and all four of those charges are predicate crimes to the first RICO charge. And so if they find that he has been, if they find him guilty of 2 of those 4 charges, those are the predicate crimes for RICO. But RICO has this additional element. It's a conspiracy, first of all. So we need another co-conspirator. And remember, the government didn't charge a co-conspirator in this case. They alluded to the co-conspirator being his chief of staff, a rotating cast of bodyguards. But they needed to show that there was an agreement, that the organization knew what it was doing, that it was an enterprise, not in law, but in fact, that people understood the object of the enterprise, which was to promote Sean Combs and his brands and sort of fulfill any deviant sexual desires he may have had, and then to cover up any crimes committed over the course of fulfilling those sexual desires. And so you do need to buy in a little bit more to a more structured, planned. Again, RICO, you think mafia, mob, organized crime, drug rings, things of that nature. So this is sort of a novel interpretation of the RICO charge, although it's being used more and more. So this is interesting on both sides. It's clearly the jury was not buying whole cloth what the government was selling.
And Caroline, to make it clear to our audience, the jury has notified the court it has reached a verdict. We do not know what that verdict is, guilty or not guilty. We know its pendency is before the court, but unresolved is count one. And it is, if I heard you correctly, your expectation, based on lots of experience, that the judge will say, go back and try some more.
Yeah, I think, look, the best outcome for all parties involved is not to have a hung jury on that one count. It is acceptable under the law. But again, you see this oftentimes, you will see this. And sometimes judges will give 2 and 3 instructions to go back. Now, it's complicated because it raises issues on appeal, right? You never want a coerced verdict. And so typically judges land somewhere in the 1 to 2 recharges or Allen charges, telling them, really work hard. But the language of this note was interesting. It did indicate a complete sort of blockage, a complete standstill, that, they weren't going to move. They often will say that, and then sometimes they do come to an agreement. Sometimes they don't. So it very likely could be that the outcome of this trial does result in a hung jury, a mistrial on that first RICO charge. And at that point, the government could decide, based on how those other 4 charges play out, they could potentially retry that case because it hasn't reached a verdict and it wouldn't violate double jeopardy standards. But those remaining 4 charges, I would note, the sex trafficking charges are hefty charges. If they win on the sex trafficking charges, that's essentially a win for the prosecution. Those carry with them each a mandatory minimum of 15 years in prison. So if he's found guilty on both, that's 30 years in prison. The transportation to engage in prostitution is sort of a lesser burden and indeed a lesser penalty. I think if he's found guilty only of those 2, the prosecution would consider that a real loss. And then with this RICO charge, it's the top charge, carries with it the possibility, a maximum sentence of life in prison, depending on how the guidelines play out with respect to this particular defendant. But there's a lot of different ways this could play out at this point, a lot of known unknowns, as it were.
Caroline Polisi, thank you so much for that perspective, especially on the charges and if guilty verdicts are brought, the implications for Sean Diddy Combs. I want to bring back Jerika Duncan, who's there at the courthouse with any latest of the developments, as well as a sort of summary of this very busy afternoon. Jerika?
Yeah, I'm just getting a note, Major, and it says at the end of it, because it's kind of long, I'm trying to parse through it all, but that the judge could inform the jury if it deliberates, we persist, they would come back Monday, July 7th. And then it says, I can tell them if they agree July 3rd and make accommodations, but that does pose logistical issues. Which way do parties want to go? Government says give them the option to deliberate on the 3rd. And then defense says they need a minute. So this is happening in real time. But I think all of this means that the judge is moving in that direction of saying, listen, you guys have been deliberating, 12, 13 hours. Let's go a little bit longer to see if you guys can reach a verdict on that count 1.
This is playing out, as Jerika just noted, in real time. It is incremental. The judge is wrestling with the various equities involved, with the jury coming back to it with verdicts on 2 of the 5 charges, not on count 1. That's our recap. This jury in the Sean Diddy Combs trial in New York City has reached a partial verdict. Let me reset that on 4 of the 5 counts. The jury has informed the judge it is unable at present to reach a decision on count 1. That charge is a racketeering charge. Next, the other significant story of the day, he calls it this, the House legislation calls it this, the Senate legislation calls it this, the big, beautiful bill. It has passed the Senate. A look at that with all the details and implications next on The Takeout.
CBS Sunday night.
Here we go.
The ultimate tradition continues.
From what I've seen, it's like chaos.
America's longest-running news magazine show is back.
For 60 minutes!
60 minutes.
With a new season.
Hey, let's go.
You're willing to talk about anything. I'm open to all of it.
Ask me the hard-hitting questions.
So how do you get over the nerves?
Honestly, it's a whole bunch of mind
The most influential people.
Who's the best coach in college football?
Let me see a mirror so I can look at it.
Are you a billionaire yet?
None of your business. Ain't you trying to get me robbed?
Investigative journalism.
Am I getting a real look at what life is like in here today? Absolutely not.
Do you think people visiting know that these were looted?
When stories threaten our way of life, 60 Minutes demands answers.
This is the pager that Hezbollah was using.
Do you have hope that you may find him yet?
They were asking me to do something that was illegal.
They're fighting for faulty parts?
Yeah.
What is the most important takeaway for our audience?
How big of a problem is doping?
Where was the military?
Why are people suspicious?
That sounds like a problem.
How is this possible?
Oh, come on.
Come on.
Whoa.
Wow.
What is going on?
I'm Scott Pelley.
I'm John Worth.
I'm Leslie Stahl.
I'm Bill Whitaker.
I'm Sharon Alfonsi.
I'm Cecilia Vega.
I'm Anderson Cooper.
This is 60 Minutes.
The CBS News original.
Showtime, baby.
It's time for 60 Minutes Sunday on CBS. Don't miss a minute. Now streaming.
This is CBS.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
Let's do this! I can see clearly now that the rain is gone.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Just get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia.
Oh, no.
I will if you will.
You go, Gail.
Yeah, boy.
Dollar Jill.
If you can't get into the market, it's okay. Renting is fine.
Box, oh, it's bad. Screw cap, oh, it's bad. It's not true.
We are making a wonderful lemony chicken.
That's good.
I wonder what Serena's doing. I wonder how Serena is feeling.
That's a really good question. No one's asked me that yet.
You're 70 years old? 70, yeah. I'm 21.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
Go to the ends of the earth.
We'll hit the heights.
A great adventure together.
And reach for the stars.
Star power. I like it.
So cool.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Something that's undeniable.
With mindfulness.
innovative,
Magical.
It's like being a child.
and truly original reporting.
God, you do your research.
I tell a good story.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
Welcome back. We have gone from breaking news to our takeout scenery because we know how to roll and adapt and be flexible with breaking news and the takeout, which is what we're at now. The Senate narrowly passed President Trump's massive budget bill this afternoon, about noon Eastern time, and sent it back, as it had to the House of Representatives. The Senate worked through the night, making last-minute changes that could, and this is important, make it tougher